take us. You know, you got to have those experiences early so that when they present themselves, they're not new. And he was like, I'll let you just do what you needed to do. And listen, we had Mad Dog 2020, 8 Ball, all the bad stuff, St. Ides, all the bad stuff. And then we continued to drink horrible things in our teen. I'm so glad that we were honor students.
I had my growing up as well. Hands up, it had to be done as a teenager.
Yeah, it makes you better. It makes you prepared. So like when you're a freshman in college, it's like it's nothing new. I'm like, 15, 15.
It's very much the attitude at home as well.
Yes. We literally talked about that yesterday.
Well, where I'm from, we were drinking Amstel and Heineken and Polar ever since we were 16.
Wow.
Yeah.
You can basically drink no problems from 16 on in Aruba,
Right. Oh, wow.
And when I was in my college years, actually, well, forget that. So like my bachelor pad before I met my wife and got serious was decked side to side in empty Miller Lite bottles. And to this day, I ask myself, why? Why? Just drink water, man.
Right. But you got to understand, you got to have the bad so you can really
appreciate the good.
Yes. Absolutely.
You got to have the bad. Because now when you get a real good beer, you're like, this is amazing.
And now in our house, our kitchen cabinets at the top, we have like the empty Russian River bottles. And we're very selective now. It's a different environment.
Nice. I do sometimes think, my God, how much money did I spend on macro lager when I was a student? Oh, I put that back to spend on really good beer now.
Oh, man.
Yeah. I will go ahead and we'll jump into some questions, but first I want to say hello to everyone. Thanks for joining. We're going to discuss storytelling, what it takes to tell stories of people in the BIPOC community, and I have some incredible storytellers here. Before diving into the questions, though, I'm going to let everyone introduce themselves. So, Rashawn, we'll start with you.
Okay, awesome. My name is Rashawn Ali. I am a multimedia personality, actor, author, and philanthropist. And I am from Atlanta, Georgia, born in Atlanta, Georgia, raised in Decatur, Georgia. Also currently co-starring in a new show coming out. Co-starring. Well, yeah. I've got a nice role in a new show coming out on BET Plus called All the Queen's Men. I'm really excited about that. And I am in the process of creating my own show called The Rules of Wine. So it chronicles Black women who are just trying to figure out life and the difference between what the lives that they have been born into and the lives that they want to create for themselves. So I'm excited to be here and be a part of this amazing conversation.
Awesome. Ravinia?
Hi, I'm Ruvani De Silva. I'm a beer writer from London, England, currently living in Austin, Texas. My family is originally from Sri Lanka, so I've got a lot of different things going on in that regard. I love being part of the beer community. My writing focuses on highlighting issues of diversity and inclusion, as well as shining a light on the Austin and Central Texas beer scene. And I'm also really, really happy and excited to be here chatting with all of you guys.
Awesome. Aaron?
Well, hi, my name is Aaron Jose, and I am one of the two founders of Two Hands, 20 Fingers. And we make documentaries about things that have social impact and, give marginalized communities a voice or amplify the voice that they already have. And for over the past 4 years, we've been working on a minority and craft beer documentary called One Pint at a Time, which we just finished a few days ago and will be releasing later this year. And we're very honored to be here to talk about storytelling, especially in these particular types of communities.
That's wonderful. All right, so let's dive in. And I want to start with why do you believe storytelling is important, especially for BIPOC communities?
Who wants to go first?
You, Aaron.
You started.
Well, I think, so I can only pull from my personal experience in terms of my current series of projects that we've been doing. So, when I got bit by the craft beer bug, we started going out, my wife and I, to different breweries around the country. And over time, we realized that tap rooms were very homogenous, very white. The staff, the brewing staff, everyone, they were friendly, but the patrons seemed to occasionally give you the stink eye, and that, just makes you feel a little weird and out of place. So we decided to play a game. We were like, every time we went to a new tap room, we would play, okay, let's see on how many fingers we can count who are the people of color in here. And sometimes it was just the two of us. Sometimes it was 5, sometimes it was 3, sometimes it was 4. But that's not a fun thing to have to do. So being a storyteller, and I've done documentaries about indigenous people in Taiwan. I've done documentaries about the LGBTQ youth and LGBTQ communities in the 1960s and 70s in Florida. So being, that kind of curious person, I wanted to know why craft beer was the way it is in this day and age. It's like, why? So we started researching all the different beer films that are out there, and most of the all of the films that are about craft beer that are out there, I could point to 1, maybe 2 that have had a few Black brewers in there. Mm-hmm. But for the most part, it was stories about all of these great white brewers and white-owned breweries. And, I think that was probably not done on purpose. It just is how it was.
Right.
So I figured, let me use my voice, right, and my skills to give all of these Black and brown brewers a platform to tell their stories. And that's kind of how One Pint at a Time was birthed. And I believe that it's the first documentary that's being released that is exclusively about Black brewers. And wow. And I feel like if I didn't step in to do this, someone else that maybe has more privilege in the industry, so to speak, may have eventually done it. And especially now, because of the kind of like this resurgence of focus on everything Black because right. of Floyd and Breonna Taylor and all the things that happened since, I guarantee you there were a lot of more privileged content creators out there that were just looking for what can we do to help, mm-hmm. be it for profiteering reasons, or they just felt guilty, or they felt like it was important. And that's the right angle. If you feel it's important and if you want to help, that's great. But I feel like we need to be telling our own stories because we need to be pushing. Now, I'm not personally African-American. I am kind of a mix of African and Indian and white and a little bit of, my dad is Afro-Caribbean and my mother is Puerto Rican. So, I'm a mix of I'm brown, right? I'm one of those brown people that loves beer. So I felt like I have a connection to the community to be able to tell this story. Mm-hmm. So that's why I wanted to do it. And that's why this project came to be. And I feel like if I didn't do it, there would be yet another white produced, white directed film about beer that's out there. And I didn't want that to be the case.
Mm.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think, my angle is a little bit different in this space, being that I'm more on the media side, but I'm a byproduct of the visionary of this particular conference, Crafted for Action, and the Atlanta Beer Boutique, because Jen Price and her mission was to really expose Black women to beer, because we grow up in this life like wine cooler, back in the early days, wine coolers, and then you get your vodka and orange juice and all that kind of stuff. But Jen was always really about beer, obviously, because her father was really big. That's the first thing he did when he came home from work. And then as being a daddy's girl, he was like, well, get you a sip. And then she became enamored of the taste of beer. And so, as friends do, we've been, best friends since we were 14. And so, we start doing things early. And when she started to really appreciate beer, which was at an early age, but really trying to understand it more, I think she went on an internship to Colorado, and she was exposed to so many beers out there, but she brought that knowledge back to our core group of friends. And I think I probably was one of the first group of friends that kind of gravitated to what that was, what the beer life was, and the difference between, you know, and no disrespect to any of the big brands, but the difference between that type of beer and like something that is smaller and like a little bit more paid attention to, and like, wow, I really can love this. And then exposing other women who always say, girl, I don't like beer. Oh, it's so nasty. And then they over there like, oh my God, I love this stout with this chocolate now. You know what I mean? So the exposure it's like one person at a time can help change the face of what the beer industry looks like. And we're seeing this with this conference. We're seeing this with just the movement in the beer space. So I think that it's very important for people like Aaron and Ruvati to really continue to share how it looks different. This is not a college white boy thing. It's that too, but it's so much bigger than that. And so it's each of our responsibility to blog, tell the stories, or even just talk about it in a word of mouth. I literally text two of our other friends today, hey, have you signed up for Beats and Brew? It's going to be great on Friday night. You know what I mean? To remind them. So it's each of our responsibilities to be able to spread the word, and our ability to tell our own story, whether it's conversation, a blog, or a documentary. We all have a responsibility to do that. So I feel like I'm a conduit of that because I'm Jen's best friend, but I'm also like an advocate for it as well. So we spread the word about beer. So we brought so many people into the space, whether they like a lager or if they like IPAs or if they like stouts. So we're all responsible to tell the story wherever we are.
Yeah, I would completely agree with that. And for me, I was always so busy trying to ensure that, you know, as a woman of color in beer, I fitted in. I made sure that I knew what I was talking about. I made sure that, you know, I could be a part of that space. And it was only really when I began writing seriously that I started to think, you know, there must be other women, other people of color, other South Asians whose stories are similar to mine, and I want to tell them. So when I began my work on my project for Good Beer Hunting on South Asian women in beer, I was the only one who I knew, and then I had to do so much research to find 4 other South Asian women in beer in North America. Can you believe it? Just 4 in this entire continent. And yet when we shared our stories, they were so similar. We'd grown up in different places, you know, we had no connection to one another all over from the UK and Canada and the US. And yet when we told our stories about our taproom experiences, the way that we get second guessed, often, usually by white men, the way that we're questioned, the way that our families have responded to our interest in beer, which is very non-traditional, we found that our stories were so similar. And I think that's one of the great things about storytelling is really sort of making that discovery and that connection, and then using that to branch even further out to bring more people in. Because when I shared that story, I got a lot of response from people who were not South Asian women saying, yes, we've also had those experiences. Well, yes, it's like that in my community too. So yeah, I think this is why it's so critical to, you know, to do that work and make those connections.
Absolutely. We've kind of talked around my next question, but it's who should be telling these stories for the BIPOC community? What do you guys think?
Well, I mean, yeah, I mean, I'm so happy and excited to see Aaron's project. We have to tell our own stories. That's just, I think that is important in the beer industry, but like we have to tell our stories throughout, which is why, you know, I'm glad I'm a part of this panel because the project that I'm working on, I'm telling women's story. Like nobody can tell our story like we can tell our story. People can do a great job and they can do research and they can do all these things and it's going to be great, but it's nothing like the person who has experienced it actually telling the actual story. And we have way too much intellect. We have way too much power. We have way too many resources to continue to allow other people to tell our stories. So I'm so excited that Aaron, that you took it upon yourself to say, you know what, I'm actually going to do this. I'm going to tell this story about the lack of the diversity in brew and the beer industry. And I have a documentary. And you said it's an hour and like.
Well, yeah. The first cut right now is an hour and 52 minutes.
Right.
Awesome.
We're here for it.
Yeah.
We're still here for it because nobody can tell our stories like we can. And I'm sure Ruveni has you've experienced so much, like, and nobody can do that. We can't sit back and allow people to do that in any industry. And I just think that we owe it to ourselves to not allow that to happen anymore.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that whole sense of storytelling and experience has been so overly colonized, and now is a really, really critical moment for us to be able to take that narrative back. And Aaron, I'm so excited to watch your film.
Same.
Seriously.
I'm excited to watch it too with folks like you and get feedback so we can make
and
it better.
drink beer at the same time.
Absolutely.
Yes, awesome.
Well, I wanted to say one thing about that is, because I was just thinking of listening to Rashawn is, you know, it think about it this way. If less than 1% of breweries are Black owned, I mean, that is a reason right there for someone of color to tell their stories, because I'm sure there's a similar like disparity in that industry too. Like in the production industry, it's obviously not as bad as 1%, but Black and brown people are still heavily underrepresented in the entertainment industry and in the documentary filmmaking world.
Right.
So I feel like, you know, any success that I can bring to this project through my experience and contacts is going to spill over into the folks whose stories I'm telling.
Yeah.
And then their successes are going to help others, you know, rise up. That's kind of how I look at it.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas I don't necessarily feel, and I'm not knocking people with other, you know, with more privilege than we have to, you know, I just don't necessarily feel that a white producer who doesn't have the connection and hasn't experienced like what I have experienced and you all have experienced is going to necessarily do that for the project.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. I might get slammed for this, but that's kind of how I feel. It's like to them, it'll be a project to help make a difference. And then they'll just go on and their merry lives and do another project. Whereas for me, my goal is for this to become more of like a series where I can tell more stories and go to the Native American community and tell their stories and go to the Latinx community and tell their stories. And the reason being is because there are a lot of great stories that need to be told in craft beer that are just now being told.
Yeah.
And they haven't been told for a very long time.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
And I'm sick and tired of people saying, oh, I think it's great that African Americans are getting into beer now. It's like, well, if you knew your history, you'd know that
We've been here.
We've been here
a long time ago. As a matter of fact, in the African continent, countries up and down the coast, Black women make beer.
Yes.
And they have
right.
countries, and they continue to. So, you know, people just need to, you know, bringing these stories to life, I think is going to just open everyone's eyes to what's out there. And that's going to make a lot of people curious and inspire them. Oh, I want to have that beer with that person, that beer with that person. I'm done having this vanilla IPA. You know, it's just going to change. And I feel like my project is just one of those projects.
Yeah.
And if we get a series going, even better, because I want to continue to bring people into the fold to continue to tell stories in craft beer. So I feel like that beverage has changed my life. It has opened me to want to do this for a long, long time, as long as there are stories like this to be told.
Yeah.
You know, and you think, and then, you know, John talks about wine, you think about wine and then spirits, distilling. brown and black people, they're getting their spotlight slowly but surely in all of these industries. In the food industry, a lot more than before, but now in the beverage industries, it's like spotlight, 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 spotlight. And it's time. So that's why I think someone of color should be telling those stories, because it's a shared experience, and their successes is going to be everyone else's successes as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, let's talk about the storytelling process, because I'm not sure people understand what goes into writing an article, creating a documentary, podcast. Could you each share your process from idea to like final project?
Sure. Ruvani, do you want to go since we?
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So I think that when it comes to telling a story, obviously when it's your own story, and we've all worked on projects, as we've been discussing, that are very, very close to us personally, then you've already, you've got your nugget of your idea. But when you start to branch out and tell stories that are related, or that you've come across people and things that interest you, first you've got to grab the idea, the very, very specific idea, make sure no one else has already done it, or at least not in the way that you are going to do it, not from your point of view, what makes you the right storyteller for that story. Research is absolutely crucial. And also finding supporting voices, finding other people who can contribute from their experience, from their knowledge, who can round out your story and make it that part of their story as well. And I think that that's why so much of the sort of more forward-thinking beer publications, that they demand a lot of voices. They don't just have one or two staff writers. They want pieces with a lot of contributing voices, because that's what makes a story whole, getting the full perspective, getting everyone's input. And I think that as people of color telling the stories of people of color, the more input, the more variety of voices that we can get, the more people are engaging with us as storytellers, the more they're going to then take the stories that we're telling and share them with others to bring even more people in.
Yeah.
Those are all really, really crucial points.
Absolutely. That I mean, you're spot on. I mean, I created my podcast. It's called the Cool Story Podcast, where I interview women and men and Black Greek letter organizations. But I also have another show called Cool People, where we're folks who are not in sororities and fraternities, Black sororities and fraternities, are a part of the show, because I didn't want to exclude anyone, but I wanted to go in with kind of a niche market, and it really did me well. I started it in 2016. And when, first started, people were like, oh, well, it's sorority stuff. And no, it's not that. That was just me trying to find something that was completely my own, and allow people to tell their story. And my tagline, everybody has a story. And so we would have these deep conversations. I mean, we talked about everything from, I have a particular sorority sister who lost a child after she gave birth to him, and her learning how to forgive God for taking a child, like all this. And it was a very deep conversation to, just people establishing their own businesses, but everybody has a story. So the thin line was that, we're all in these Black Greek letter organizations. That was the commonality, but the bigger story was their story. And you never know how somebody else's story can help someone else's. And that's what it's all about. When you allow someone to tell their story, whatever that story is, how they react, how they respond, when someone's listening or watching, they too can take that information or seeing their response and say, when I am faced with something similar, I too can react like this person does or did, and be a better person from that. So storytelling is so important. You never know what these deep conversations, these deep stories, these deep documentaries can help shape and reshape someone, can help change someone. And when you realize that it's bigger than you and it's not about you, of course, you're the conduit, you're the person that is delivering, but you're understanding that what you're putting out can have a massive impact, then you have a better understanding of what your life is and what your purpose is, because we understand, I say it all the time, our journeys have less to do with us and more to do with other people witnessing it. So your blog, your documentary, this conference, Stephanie, all the things that you're doing, someone is watching that we may never meet. We may never meet, and their lives can be completely changed by the obedience that has been placed on our lives that we decided to fulfill. So us as storytellers, we are brilliantly crafted, or we are brilliantly, no, I want to change that word. We are brilliant people doing brilliant work for a brilliant result to change the world. And if we take that into everything that we're doing, then we know the result of our work can be life-changing for someone else. And so when we go into it with that attitude, then what we've done on this earth, that little dash in between the day we're born and the day that we are called home, we got to make that thing count. And I think content creators and storytellers, we get the driver's seat in that. We are the truth.
Well, I don't think I can top that, so I can stop here. For me, it's being a documentary filmmaker. You know, you're telling the story of life, what people go through to live. What is it? Follow their bliss, follow their passion, right? And the most important part of what I do, especially since you just don't want to highlight people and then be gone, you have to develop relationships with people first, because they need to be comfortable enough to let you in and not even realize they're being filmed. Yes. That is very difficult. So for me, you know, I had to research and approach people that I realized were having the same experiences that I was, like in tap rooms, like, oh, we did this because we didn't feel the industry was diverse enough, right? And then say, hey, you know, I'm in the process of producing a documentary that actually talks about some of these issues. You want to talk? And then it's this type of situation where we have a conference call just to meet each other. And if they're local, I spend time with them, and no cameras. And that takes time. That's why it took almost 4 years to make this project. It's because I'm developing relationships with people, and I'm not doing a promo video for them. So it's not like I'm just spending a few hours with them and they sit down, they talk, they tell their origin story, and then it's out. So I'm following people that are going through career changes and life changes as they're trying to diversify the beer industry. So, you know, I'm talking about their childhood and talking about what got them into beer, and talking about their passions and how they want to diversify. And just their mere existence in the beer industry already is them diversifying the beer industry. But, you know, I have to make them comfortable with me and my camera crew, right? And then go back and see them and spend time with them over the years again and again, and kind of do these interviews over and over, and you know, shoot them doing different things that we put in the film. And that takes time. And especially to do it at the scale of a feature, you will spend 2 to 3 years, including post-production, right? Because then you got to put all those pieces together and have it tell a cinematic story. That's it. You just got to dedicate yourself to doing that, in hopes that, like what Rashawn said, you're going to help make a difference and have a big impact. Because my hope with this project is that any brewery in any part of the country can just show it as a special screening, and just have it be like a conversation starter, and a mirror with which they can look at their own business practices, you know, towards their clientele or their staff, and to see where they are, you know, and if they need to change. You know, maybe they're doing great, and maybe they're diverse enough, but it's still, that's kind of what I want this film to be. I don't just want it to be out there. I want it to help in some way, maybe in a grassroots way, help with that conversation so that it can help make some actual change. Might be a little bit of change, but a little bit is better than nothing. So, so that's kind of my process with, you know, because I also do short documentaries, which you can tell in a shorter period of time, which might take a few months to do it, right? Which you end up with a 5 to 10 minute piece. In the case of the one that I did about Fresh Fest, which I did 3 years ago, called The Fresh Perspective, I spent about a week documenting the festival and things that happened after the festival, and collected footage and collected other material too after the fact. But that was a 12-minute film. See, this is a 2-hour film that took us 4 years to get to this point, because you're meeting new people and you're realizing that, oh, their stories need to be in this because they're going to make an impact. And then you find that some of the earlier people that you were following, their stories cannot stretch over a 2-hour period. They're not going to hit as hard, right? And then you got to cut them, and that hurts, but you got to do it. You got to make those decisions. And I'm sure when you're writing, you know, when you're doing something that features multiple people, you're like, oh, okay, yeah, this just isn't going to work. You got to just go delete, and you feel you got to bring these people again.
It's so hard to do that.
Yeah, and but you have to do it because you have to think of it as a movie. You have to pull the audience in and keep them interested, and you have to go with the best stories that are going to carry over the course of like a 3-act story structure, right? So that's kind of, in a nutshell, how I do what I do.
Nice.
I wanted to go back to something you said about building those relationships. That I have found is so key, especially when you're telling stories where it's a sensitive topic. So I'm thinking about a story I did about women. It was about keeping women safe in the beer industry. And that topic is such it's a difficult one to cover, especially because you're digging up traumas and building those relationships, being sensitive to the subject matter is just so important. And I think that you can apply that to any kind of story you're telling, where you're showing appreciation for your source, and making sure that they feel comfortable sharing whatever their topic is. So next question. Could you share a time when a story reflected your personal experience, and how did it affect how you told the story?
Personal experience.
Let's see. I can go first.
Okay.
So I was Thanksgiving week a few years ago. I don't remember what year. I want to say almost 7 years ago. My dad was in town. My dad lives in Aruba. I'm Orlando based. And he had gotten a call from one of his old college friends. He was a professional tennis player. And, he toured he played all the big major Grand Slam tournaments, and he did well, very successful. And he was also a good collegiate player too. And he was very close with his coach, his collegiate coach, because my dad's father died when he was very young. So his friend had called him and said, hey, coach, we're going to have a reunion, a 40-year reunion with the college team. Are you in Jacksonville, Florida? And my dad's like, yeah, absolutely. And that phone call lit a fire under me to have a deeper connection with my father by learning about my dad's tennis coach and his history with his collegiate tennis team, because he'd always told me these little stories about, just as we're hanging out, I said, oh yeah, in college, this and that and the other. But I was able to turn that into a film that I narrated, and I didn't put myself in the film, but my voice carried the film, which is a thing I don't usually do. I stay out of it. It's like I'm the vessel, I present it, and then I can talk about it later. But I was the voice of the film to connect the dots, because for me, it was about ultimately developing a deeper connection with my father by learning about his ailing, because he was his coach had cancer, by learning about my dad's coach and how special he was to not only my father, but the rest of the team, because everyone on their team, like they were a Southeast Texas tennis team by a white coach who was a spiritual man and a loving man. And everyone on the tennis team was from Latin America or the Caribbean. So it was the only tennis team of its kind in the 60s and 70s in college. So I infused myself into that project by becoming the voice of it, because it was the most personal film I felt I'd ever do. And to date, it's been the most personal film I've ever done. So that's kind of how I decided, because of what the story is, I was going to tell it that way, and I don't usually do it that way.
Yeah. When I was when I was applying for film schools after my time at Florida A&M, I had this big dream of becoming a director, and I'm still going to be a director, but I thought I was going to go to film school. I applied to Florida State and NYU and American University. I got into American, went and visited. Long story short, it's been well documented on my last show that I did that my mom said no, I couldn't go to film school. So I wasn't one of those kids that would fight for myself, and so that was the word. And so I came home and I tried to figure it out. But the irony of it was the short that I filmed to be accepted into film school was about her. And when she lost her brother at a very, very, when she was first married to my dad, so she was probably about 26 years old. And so it's just the irony of her saying no, and the actual film that I shot was about her. So there was a lot of hurt there, but I was able to overcome that. But it was very personal to me, that story, because I wanted to tell her story. And I truly immersed myself into that project. But now that I'm like in this creative space and I'm older and I have much more experience, maybe I wasn't supposed to go to film school then, and to get the acting experience that I have, and television and radio, all these things have to come together so that I can be the director that I want to be. So I had to have the life experiences outside of the getting my master's degree and the academic experience. So that was probably if I could think of something that was the most personal, because it hit in different ways as far as personal, but it grew me, and it made me a better person. And I think that when I am in the director's chair, hopefully by the end of this year, it will be an even greater experience, just because that first project was so personal to me. Yeah.
Obviously, writing about South Asian women in beer for Good Beer Hunting that was a hugely personal piece for me. But I've actually taken a lot of inspiration for a lot of my articles from personal experience, things that I've lived through professionally and personally. Most recently, I published a piece with the Burham Collective in the UK about beer and classism, which is a huge deal in the UK. Craft beer has a reputation for being very, very elitist. And there's been a bigger argument that's brewed recently around the release of craft beer into supermarkets, which I know for an American audience doesn't sound like a big deal at all. But in the UK, it's still a relatively new thing, and a lot of people are not very happy about it. And I, as someone who didn't grow up in a sort of very well-off or privileged environment, my first sort of introductions to craft beer came from being in America, going to the store, being able to buy it at an affordable price and in an accessible way. So the sort of gatekeeping element of that resonated with me very deeply. And I really just spewed out of me this sort of rage that people felt that craft beer should be kept only for people with, a certain income and from a certain background. And I really sort of poured myself into that, and was really, really excited and happy to work with the Burham Collective, who really responded well to my feelings on the situation, and published it pretty much uncut, which was which was pretty cool. Also, a lot of my work for Beer is for Everyone. Again, I've been lucky to work with a great editor who's really been keen for me to bring my personal experiences on board. One particular piece I wrote was about the problem with the term Asian. How can you use one word to describe 48 million people? And how that can, in many ways, annul and delete parts of our identity, and force us to either have to speak up in ways that some people find, threatening and aggressive, or force us to dumb ourselves down. And I think that's another really, really huge issue for anyone from any minority. We're so used to being lumped together and not being given our own identity. And I think that hopefully that's something that resonated with a lot of people beyond sort of just my experience.
Yeah. I'm going to jump into we've gotten 2 questions so far I wanted to send us to discuss. So very recently, there has been a demand of diversifying the brewing industry. Do you think do you think there has been a substantial impact yet, or do we still have a ways to go?
Ways to go.
Yeah.
Ways to go. Hi, Ravi. Great to see you. And yet, ways to go. Definitely.
Ways to go. Ways to go. I mean, the less than 1%, and we're in 2021. No, ways to go. And I don't know if I was having this conversation with you, Stephanie, a few days ago. Might have been you. Might have been someone else at the opening. Every year there's thousands of an additional 1,000, 1,500, whatever breweries that are tacked on to the total. So even if, blacks and browns and, everyone that's part of that group, or they say they're part of that group, even if they open more breweries, how many are they really going to be of that 1,000, 1,500, 2,000 extra that come? So I feel like they're always going to be hovering around 1%, maybe 2%, right? But that's ownership, right? I think the workforce is definitely growing. Mm-hmm. So, working as assistant brewers or working as marketing, all of that stuff's important. But I think ultimately it needs to get to the point where, people of color are owning bigger brands so that they can make a bigger impact.
Yes.
I think that's really going to be the shift, because if you have just nano and microbreweries opening by Black and brown people, they're not going to be able to make as big of an impact. But if they build it up to where they can affect more, like there's more distribution and they make more money, and then by making more money they grow, and then they can hire from within the communities, which isn't a practice that, as we know, is in a standard practice, then I think they can make more of have more of an impact that way. And then that percentage is going to go up. And then at that point, I'll be like, okay, it's getting a lot better, but there's still a long ways to go.
Well, I'm one of those people that's always going to, err on the side of just positive. Let's talk about the gains that we've experienced. I mean, let's talk about even us having this conversation on this platform with this particular conference. Nothing has ever been done like this on this level. So that should be applauded. Also, just because I'm personally connected to the creator of this conference, I have seen a major shift in and around the Atlanta area and beyond, especially with Black women really, really saying, I am going to immerse myself into this craft beer industry and really finding each other. And really creating a community where there's a safe space and where they can truly be themselves and really have a beer. Because, at Black parties, I mean, I'm just keeping it 100%. If it's a Black girl with a beer, you're like, what's she doing up there drinking a beer?
Yeah.
Not anymore, because we are starting to normalize beer, and Black women have a beer and having a beer in their hand. That's not some crap. So we have to really, while we do have a long ways to go, we have made incredible gains. And that is because of each of you who are in this space coming together to make sure that we're continuing to forward the narrative. And it's not just a conversation. Each of you are doing the work, and I'm part of it too. I'm truly immersed in it, but I'm a cousin of the movement, but I'm in the movement, So we got to talk about those things and the conversations we're having, the events we're having this week. That should be applauded, and each of you should be applauded for being in this space, because we are doing it one step at a time. And cheers to damn that. Okay.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Absolutely. Yeah, I echo that. Like, I had a coworker ask me how I knew Jen, and I was like, let me tell you, I'd walk into a tap room and it was just the only Black people in the room were me and my husband. And I would see Jen and I'm like, who is this woman? I need her. I need to know her. I need her to be my friend.
Right.
And now when I look around, I mean, we have Craft Women Connect. Like, it's so beautiful being in a brewery and seeing so many faces that look like yours.
Yeah.
And that was not the case 10 years ago when I started drinking beer, craft beer. And it's so beautiful to see that now. And long ways to go, but we
Yeah.
are making progress.
Absolutely.
Definitely.
Absolutely.
Craft Women Connect are doing such an amazing job, and I think being able to go online, was one silver lining of the pandemic for them, because being able to incorporate, bring in women from all over the country and all over the world, I mean, that's huge. That's absolutely huge. I was privileged enough to write about them for Beers for Everyone, and just hearing their stories, watching them interact with each other, just when we were all chatting on Zoom, it was so much fun. It's
Yes.
Yes. Awesome.
brilliant. Yeah.
Good stuff.
Yeah. I am going to jump into another question. This one is from Denise. Many stories that are mainstream really focus on BIPOC pain and trauma. So what are new styles or stories you would like to see about BIPOC?
I think just, of course, focus more on them being successful like everyone else, right? Find the stories and the arenas where they're successful and highlight those. But also show them as people, right? Just living, because that's ultimately what their right is to live just a normal life, just like everyone else, and just be treated like human beings, just like everyone else.
Mm-hmm.
And I know there's this infatuation because these are intense stories, with stories being told about them where they're being harassed, they're being persecuted and discrimination, and yeah, it makes for great content, but I've gotten sick of it too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that, conversations like these, but then people who dare to really tell our truth. And, I, as scared as I am about telling certain truths about, who women desire to be, as opposed to what societal norms have shown them who they're supposed to be, because it's completely different from because I'm a part of the societal norm. So starting to share those stories is very scary. But there's so much truth in it, and I'm excited to do it, but also scared at the same time. But it shows the beauty of women and really trying to discover who they are. And I just want to, Glennon Doyle, she has a book called Untamed that really changed my life. It really changed my life and my perspective on so many things. It just allowed me to open my mind up to so much more, and understanding that when you live for yourself, it may come at the detriment of hurting someone else, but who do you want to hurt more? Yourself or someone else? And so learning how to try to find what that looks like. And if I can't live it, honestly, at least I can tell the story. And that's just my truth.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I think being able to show both sides, the pain and the trauma, but also the joy that comes when you are able to make strides, when you're able to achieve. I mean, they're two sides of the same coin, and it's really important we don't lose sight of one in the face of the other. And as storytellers, it's our responsibility, and also, many ways our privilege, to be able to delve in and give that whole picture that other people may not know. They may only see one side. So we're there to give that whole sense of, as Aaron was saying, of human beings as a whole.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and on that subject of telling these stories and balancing the pain and trauma ones from just joy and excellence, how, when you are telling a story that involves that pain and trauma, how do you balance your capacity to tell them? Because it can get difficult when, if it, especially if it's personal, like you're seeing another Black person, I'm telling a story of a Black person, or I'm telling my story, and it's difficult. How do you like balance out that story? Do you, and then how do you, the buzzword self-care, like how do you handle relaying those stories when it could be painful to you?
Mm.
I think at some point you have to realize that you're just one human being talking to another human being, and that's a
God.
connection you have to have first.
Ooh,
And if that
it
means,
sounds so easy. It sounds so easy.
yeah,
Damn.
if it means from my point of view stopping the camera, then I'll do it. And I've done it before.
Yeah.
And I've even been told in situations where it felt okay for the camera to keep rolling to, hey, I don't feel comfortable sharing that part of the project, or part of, I don't feel comfortable sharing that part about my story in the project. And I'm, you have to be like, yeah, because ultimately you have to understand that if you share certain things with the world that aren't supposed to be out there, you could end up hurting someone more than helping them.
Yeah.
So that for me, it's that's the balance, at least from a documentary standpoint. Is sometimes, I mean, I guess there's one instance that I could recall, like my first feature-length documentary. We were in Taiwan, and I was telling a story about a friend of mine who was returning to the land of his birth to connect with his indigenous heritage, because in Taiwan, people just didn't know that in Taiwan there were all these indigenous tribes. People just felt, just the mainstream, right? People just felt that Taiwan was just connected to China. So there are only Chinese people in Taiwan. No, there's all these other cultures. So he was there to learn more about his indigenous roots. And during the filming, his wife's father got really sick. We were all there. We were there for 2 months filming with them. And they said, no, you know what? Film. Keep it in the movie. But we had their permission right then and there. And to me, that's a big deal, because that's something that could literally shut down your production or take it in a completely different direction. And it's, very traumatic to lose your father, right? And his wife, my friend's wife, said, look, we're Buddhist. We understand this was meant to be. Just keep it in the film. And we had their permission, and we kept it in the film. It was just one of those things where I was like, I'll stop. We'll take a break. We'll come back next week. We'll come on another trip. They're like, no, you're here on this journey with us. This is part of our journey. Keep going.
Oh.
Wow.
So it ended up in the film. But I've dealt with a few of those situations, and they're not comfortable for the folks in front of the camera, and it's a very difficult situation for us, because we want to tell a compelling story, but then we have to realize, at least from a documentary standpoint, I'm sure if you're writing too, you're like, man, no, you're a human, you're a person connecting with another person. Let's take this facade away for a second and try to work this out, and just be, because ultimately it's the relationship, and you want to continue to tell that story. But if you're doing something that's immoral or unethical, then that's not right. So you have to be able to maneuver that. It's not an easy thing to go through.
Definitely. I also think it's one of the reasons why it's so important that we have storytellers from within our own communities who are sensitive and can respond based on their own experiences, rather than putting the story first, as it were, and looking for sensationalist angles. And I think that when you've got lived experience to compare to the stories that you're telling, you have that much higher degree of sensitivity and also appropriateness to tell a story that's authentic without being exploitative.
Good stuff. I don't have a comment on that one.
Okay. We have another question. Great conversation. I think a lot about how BIPOC writers and storytellers can support each other, specifically telling stories in beer. How can we create community and ensure we all thrive?
Well, that's kind of what we're doing now.
Yeah. Yeah. And
That's
this-
what I was gonna say, is because I wouldn't have met the three of you had it not been for what I was doing and what Jen is doing and coming together that way. It's this
Absolutely.
intersection, and this is a community, because you know, this isn't the last time that we're gonna hear from each other.
Absolutely.
Certainly not the last time I'll be seeing the two of you. The two on the left of my screen, the one in the, you know, in Texas. Hopefully, we'll get to meet soon. We'll stay in touch.
I'll make
Yeah,
it back
this is
to
about
Atlanta.
creating community, because we all have to help each other, because we're working towards the same goal.
Right. And I think that the what we saw on the opening night of this conference at Lentucky, hey, we're at a Black brewery, you know, they're about to do their thing in this event space, and like all the love, and everybody was from their own, you know, walk of life in beer, and you all came together for a beer sharing and a, you know, kickoff to this conference. That is how we continue to support each other, to make sure that the community knows exactly what you're doing, so that we can show up, not just for this, but for what everyone is doing. And I think that this community that has been established here in Atlanta with diversity in beer is really showing up and showing out for each other, because we want to see everyone. When one person wins, we all win. We think about this conference, all of us are coming together, whether it's, you know, on these virtual sessions or panel discussions or in-person event, like it's all coming together to support each other. We, all three of us or four of us, have talked about what we are doing in the space. And this is just one session today. And so this has been going on throughout the week and all of the different events. And we just have to stay vigilant and have to stay consistent as to how we can continue to support each other. Because when we have our backs, we win. That is the long and the short of it.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I love
And
that.
I can't wait for this to be back next year, so that we can be much bigger and face to face. Can you just imagine that? It's going to
Yes.
be crazy.
Yeah.
And hug and love.
Yes.
Oh,
I'm looking forward to it.
Wow.
All right. I can't believe how much time has passed by so
Right.
quickly. So,
Time passes when you're having fun.
yes. What advice do y'all have for other people who are interested in becoming storytellers?
Just do it.
Mm.
Just do it, and realize that it's going to take a while before you find your voice, but you got to practice.
Mm.
I mean, it's the same while you're writing. Same thing when you're making movies. Writing is a part of that too, but it's not as much for what I do. But it's like, you're gonna go out there and when you say I'm a storyteller and you own it, then you're a storyteller. You just got to make yourself into a great storyteller at that point. You got to just go out and write, or in my case, go out and shoot, and understand and teach yourself, right, and the principles of what it is that you got to do to be better at what you do. And over time, with passion, it'll just come. It's like, if you do something, do it with love, it'll love you back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And don't forget, and don't be afraid to pour into yourself too. So I signed up for Masterclass, $179 a year, but they have so much information, these courses that you would literally pay probably, you know, $500, $600 for per course, and writing and script writing and all these different things. I got myself back into acting classes with my acting coach from years ago. And I'm like, if I'm going to be good, why don't I like continue to pour into myself? Like,
Yes.
I mean, like, why not? And if you have the means, and even if you don't have the means or whatever, you can get with a friend, you can get with a writing partner. There's too many people out here trying to do similar things where you all can work together to create something great. And I always say the first step is to take the first step. Just go and just take the first
do it.
Just do
step.
it.
Just like Aaron said.
Gotta jump in, because no one else but you can do you.
Yeah.
That's it.
You have to be the first one to do you.
Yeah, because can't nobody else do you. Like,
Absolutely.
and it's room for everybody. That's the thing. I think a lot of times people get caught up in, well, she's doing this or he's doing that or they're doing that. Do you?
Yes.
There's no one like you. There's no one that can tell your story, period.
And especially in what we're trying to do together, if we're all doing us, but all of the us's together is helping the greater cause.
Yes.
Exactly. And don't be afraid to reach out to this community, because it's a good place. It's a welcoming place. We all want to support each other. We all want to be doing events like this, building it up and making it as great as it possibly can be. So yeah, definitely the more the merrier, and there's a space for everyone here.
Absolutely. There's space for everyone, because I alone can't tell everyone's story. You can't tell everyone here. There are so many people, so many stories.
Absolutely. So, yeah. Thank you. Stephanie, before we go, you didn't tell us what you do.
I am a beer writer. I also am a social media coordinator at Monday Night Brewing here in Atlanta. So I love I love to tell stories about diversity and inclusion in the beer industry.
Awesome.
And I have some work also at Good Beer Hunting, if anyone wants to check that out. I don't have my handle on here, She Loves Craft. I have a portfolio if you go to my Instagram page, and you can check out all my work.
Awesome.
Nice.
Yeah. You got to show yourself off, sis.
You're right.
You've done some amazing articles.
Yes.
Such a joy to read.
Thank you.
Awesome.
This was great. I appreciate it.
It was. Thank you so much.
Thanks to Jen. Thanks to all of you.
It's been great to meet you all, and thanks so much to Jen for hosting us.
Absolutely.
Yes. I guess we can close out. You can find me at Rashawn Ali. My handle's right there, and just continue to click in.
Same here at 2 Hands 20 Fingers on Insta. So, or our film, which is at One Pint Film, spelled out ONEPAINTFILM. And thanks for tuning in. It's been a great conversation.
And I'm Amethyst Heels on Instagram and Twitter. And please, hit me up, and we can share some stories.
Yay. Thank you.